Colin Kaepernick's story isn't going away as much as the NFL would like it to do so. There was a report from Matt Barrows of The Athletic on Monday taking season with the 49ers. Now, part of the false narratives that have been circulating for the last 3.5 years focus on 2016, focus on Kaepernick's performance that year. There's a screenshot from ESPN that gets used by the people who are anti-Kaepernick to suggest he wasn't good in 2016. People will say he was benched for Blaine Gabbert in 2016. That is just flat out false. As false narratives go, it's one of the most false. What happened was after the 2015 season, Colin Kaepernick had 3 different surgeries, and he was recovering from those surgeries throughout the offseason, and he wasn't ready to be the starter. He wasn't even in uniform for the first couple of preseason games. One of the reasons people didn't notice he was sitting for the national anthem is because he wasn't dressed. He didn't play. He wasn't even in position to play in the first couple of preseason games. It wasn't until he was in uniform and people saw his name across the back of the jersey and his number 7 sitting on the bench that it even became an issue in late August of 2016. So he didn't lose the job to Blaine Gabbert. Blaine Gabbert was healthy. And then when the 49ers benched Blaine Gabbert for a finally healthy Colin Kaepernick, Jeremy Curley, who ended up being the leading receiver on the team that year, said that Kaepernick energized the offense. And he ultimately threw 16 touchdown passes against 4 interceptions. And I know that the 49ers only had 1 win while Kaepernick started that year. But look, the same people who are going to shout and scream that quarterback wins don't count when a team wins a lot of games, so we think the quarterback is better than his numbers would indicate, those same people need to acknowledge that if the team doesn't win games with the quarterback on the field, that shouldn't be an indictment of his overall performance either. They had a lot of injuries that year. Chip Kelly was the wrong choice for head coach. They were going through a lot of transition and dysfunction. Remember, it was the 3rd of 3 straight years that saw the coach get fired at the end of the season. Jim Harbaugh fired, or mutual parting, after the 2014 season. Jim Harbaugh has since said that's baloney. He was fired. Jim Tom Sula, one and done, fired after 2015. Chip Kelly, one and done, fired after 2016. So the idea that Kaepernick stunk in 2016 isn't supported by the evidence. Now, at times in 2015 and 2016, after he signed that big contract, he wasn't as good as he had been early in his career. But when a guy goes from being a franchise quarterback, a guy that Ron Jaworski once said on ESPN and created like a week of content as they churned it, that Kaepernick could be one of the best quarterbacks ever, when he goes from that to middle of the pack mediocre at best, if we accept that premise, it doesn't mean that the end result is he's out of the league altogether. Jameis Winston isn't out of the league. He's the backup in New Orleans. Marcus Mariota isn't out of the league. He's the backup with the Raiders. There would have been, should have been, could have been an opportunity to be a backup somewhere for Colin Kaepernick if he wasn't blackballed by the NFL. And that's really the broader point. And we can debate all we want the question of whether or not the NFL collectively shunned Colin Kaepernick. The evidence suggests that it did, and the fact that the NFL eventually paid out a sum reportedly between $5 and $10 million to settle his collusion claim suggests that the NFL, which has a pretty long track record of winning in court and also a pretty long track record of not giving in, unless there's a reason to give in, there was a reason to give in. And remember, they didn't buy out Colin Kaepernick's employment rights when they settled that grievance in early 2019. He could still file another collusion grievance against the NFL if he wanted to. I don't know that he wants to. I do know that he wants to play, though. And I continue to be astounded by this current posture as we addressed over the weekend. Remember when the NFL initially said via NFL media that there are multiple teams interested in Colin Kaepernick. We reported to PFT, well, none of them have reached out to Kaepernick or his agents. Well, the volley then from the NFL via NFL media was the teams are talking to friends and associates of Colin Kaepernick. Well, Kaepernick's camp has, first of all, no idea who these friends and associates are. And the way it was couched by NFL media was something like this, that they're going to do their homework without talking to Kaepernick or his agents until they get to the point where they're reasonably comfortable that they can sign Kaepernick to a contract. At that point, they'll talk to the agent, which makes no sense because, and I know this is high-level negotiation strategy, but one of the ways you get comfortable with your ability to sign a player to a contract is to talk to his agent. So none of it makes any sense. Now, the best argument, I think, in support of whatever it is the NFL is doing, and it's not an argument that makes it right, it's an argument that helps us understand where they're coming from. I really do think there's kind of a loose effort here to run out the clock, to feign interest in Colin Kaepernick until the attention of the media and the fans moves on to something else. Maybe whether or not we're even going to have football at all this year. If we can just, and it's not exactly good news for the NFL. Hey, if we can just delay this story until the point where all anyone is talking about is whether we're going to be able to play games this year, we win. Well, you don't, but that may be what they're doing, because as we'll discuss in a few minutes, I feel like we are getting closer and closer to the point where some tough conversations need to be had about whether or not football is even possible given where the pandemic currently is.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.